Welcome to the topic febrile neutropenia in the hematology module. By the end of this topic, you should be able to define febrile neutropenia, explain the pathophysiology of febrile neutropenia, outline the causes of febrile neutropenia, outline the classification of this condition, describe the clinical manifestations, outline the investigations done, discuss the principles of management, and finally, discuss the complications and prognosis of febrile neutropenia. Let's get started. Neutropenic fever is when there's a single oral temperature greater than or equal to 38.3 degrees or a temperature of more than or equal to 38 degrees for at least an hour with an absolute neutrophil count of less than 1500 cells per microliter. In severe neutropenia, the absolute neutrophil count is less than 500 per microliter or that is expected to decrease below 500 cells per microliter in the next 2 hours. The main tasks of the body's immune system are to fight pathogens like bacteria, viruses, parasites or fungi and to remove them from the body, to recognize and neutralize harmful substances from the environment, and to fight disease-causing changes in the body such as cancer cells. Neutropenic fever occurs when a neutropenia patient encounters an infectious pathogen. In this immunocompromised state, patients lose or have weakened immunity to fend off infections. The host barriers such as the mucosal lining of the GI tract or sinuses may be damaged, leading to the host open to invasion from an infectious agent. Neutropenic fever is caused by conditions that decrease neutrophil production or increase neutrophil destruction. Some of these conditions include severe infections such as sepsis, hepatitis or tuberculosis, bone marrow diseases such as aplastic anemia or myelofibrosis, autoimmune diseases such as systemic lupus erythematosus or rheumatoid arthritis, cancer treatments such as chemotherapy or radiation therapy, and hematopoietic stem cell transplant. This table shows the MASCC risk index or scoring and some causes of febrile neutropenia. So here we have the characteristics as well as the weightage that's given. A burden of febrile neutropenia with no or mild symptoms gets the highest weight. If there's no hypertension, the weight is 5. No COPD, it shows 4. A solid tumor or hematological malignancy with previous fungal infection is 4. No dehydration requiring parenteral fluid is 3. Burden of febrile neutropenia with moderate symptoms, it's 3. Outpatient status 3, and age more than 60 years old is 2. So patient is stratified according to the MASCC criteria as we just had a look and managed accordingly. The score of the risk index shown in the previous slide is based on the previous number, mild or moderate symptoms, whether is there presence of hypertension, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, solid tumor or hematological malignancy with fungal infection present, or dehydration requiring parenteral fluids, outpatient status, and lastly the age less than 60 years as we have seen. And this table shows the classification of risk for infection with febrile neutropenia. So if one has a risk index of 21 and less, it renders them to be in the high risk group as opposed to those with a risk index of more than 21. Now let's discuss the clinical manifestations of febrile neutropenia. A review of medical history would include recent antibiotic therapy, surgery, invasive procedures, any past infections, and potential exposure to infected visitors, pets, plants, or contaminated food. In the presence of neutropenia, the usual signs and symptoms of infection may be reduced or absent, and often fever is the only reliable symptom. Other significant symptoms of infection include abdominal pain or perirectal pain, and some individuals may develop complications such as severe sepsis or septic shock. Symptoms may include extreme pain, increased heart rate, confusion, shortness of breath, and shivering. Any potential portal of entry for pathogens should be carefully examined, including the skin, mucous membranes, gastrointestinal tract, urinary tract, and any intravenous catheters or line sites. Signs of febrile neutropenia include mucositis of the gastrointestinal tract, hypotension, and oliguria. Now let's talk about the investigations needed for febrile neutropenia. A full blood count should be ordered to determine the patient's neutropenic level. Blood, urinalysis, and throat cultures must be done to determine the source of infection. 2 sets of blood culture should be obtained from the peripheral vein and any venous catheters, as well as specimens for testing from any sites of infection before the immediate administration of empirical broad-spectrum antimicrobial therapy. Urinary tract infections should be suspected in asymptomatic patients with a history of such infections. If diarrhea is present, a sample may be checked, and if the patients have any respiratory symptoms, a chest X-ray is necessary. 2 widely used assessment tools, the Multinational Association for Supportive Care in Cancer, as mentioned, quotient MASCC and the clinical index of the stable neutropenic febrile neutropenia can be part of the patient's interview. Now, these tools can help to risk stratify patients into a high risk and low risk neutropenic fever. This picture shows the clinical index of stable febrile neutropenia. Now, let's discuss the management of febrile neutropenia. In low risk patients, oral empirical therapies with a fluoroquinolone plus amoxicillin or clavulanate is recommended in the outpatient setting. Clindamycin can be used for those with penicillin allergies. However, if the patient remains febrile for 48 to 72 hours, the patient will require admission. For high-risk patients presenting with neutropenic fever, an intravenous antibiotic therapy should be given within 1 hour after triage and be monitored for more than 4 hours before discharge. If patients do not respond to treatments, coverage should be expanded to include resistant species. Vancomycin is not recommended for initial therapy but should be considered if suspecting catheter-related infection, skin or soft tissue infections, pneumonia or hemodynamic instability. Most patients with chemotherapy-induced febrile neutropenia recover rapidly without serious complications. However, it remains a life-threatening treatment-related toxicity and correlates with chemotherapy dose reductions and delays in continuing chemotherapy, potentially compromising treatment outcomes. A very low score with less than 15 demonstrates a high rate of complications. So patients with severe sepsis and septic shock commonly have procalcitonin concentrations greater than 2 nanograms per milliliter, which merits consideration for an increased likelihood of poor prognosis. In summary, neutropenic fever can be dangerous and is considered a medical emergency as a severe decrease in the absolute neutrophil count compromises the immune system's ability to fight against opportunistic infections. In immunocompromised states, patients lose or have weakened immunity to fend off infections, leaving the host open to invasion from an infectious pathogen. The causes of febrile neutropenia are bone marrow disorders, active infections, sepsis, hepatitis, chemotherapy, and autoimmune diseases. In the presence of neutropenia, the usual signs and symptoms of infection may be reduced or absent, and often fever is the only reliable symptom. Blood, urinalysis, and throat cultures should be performed to determine the source of infection. Treatment begins with an immediate evaluation, risk assessment for complications, and blood cultures to find the causative bacteria. Then individuals are given broad-spectrum empirical antibiotic therapy. Low-risk patients are commonly given oral antibiotics, while high-risk patients generally get intravenous antibiotics. We have come to the end of this topic. Thank you.